You wake up on another Monday, and something inside you whispers that there's something deeply wrong with this routine. It's not just tiredness or the morning rush, but a more disturbing feeling that you're living someone else's life, following a script you never wrote. This restlessness you feel isn't neurosis or ingratitude for the life you've built. It's actually the first sign of an awakening that will change everything you believe about yourself and the world around you. But here's the truth. No one tells you about awakening. It's a one-way path that demands 3 painful and irreversible sacrifices. 3 losses that, once experienced, forever change the way you experience human existence. The first loss is perhaps the most devastating. You lose forever the ability to live on autopilot. Imagine for a moment what your life was like before you questioned the structures that govern it. You woke up, followed your routine, worked, consumed, connected with people, slept, and repeated this cycle without realizing that each action was guided by invisible social programs. There was a cruel beauty in that unconsciousness, a peace that came from unquestioned certainty. You simply existed within the tracks society had built for you, and that was enough. But awakening is like discovering you've always lived in a room with walls painted to look like windows. Once you realize they're paintings, you can never see real landscapes in them again. This loss of automatic unconsciousness has deep roots in the evolution of human consciousness. For thousands of years, our ancestors lived in small tribes where social roles were clear and traditions provided ready-made answers to life's big questions. There was no need to question because meaning was automatically passed down from generation to generation through rituals, myths, and solid social structures. The individual didn't need to create their own identity or seek their own purpose, because these were already defined by the group. It was a way of living that offered psychological safety in exchange for individual autonomy. The modern world destroyed these traditional structures without replacing them with anything equivalent. Instead, it created the illusion that we can live without structures of meaning, or that we can simply replace ancestral traditions with corporate protocols, social media trends, and consumption cycles. But when you awaken, you realize these modern replacements are even more hollow than the traditions we lost. At least ancestral traditions attempted to answer the great questions about death, love, suffering, and transcendence. Modern structures only distract us from those questions with endless entertainment and promises of happiness through material acquisition. I want to pause for a moment and ask, do you also feel this impossibility of returning to unconsciousness after certain truths have been revealed? That feeling that even when you try to distract yourself or ignore what you've discovered, your mind can no longer accept the simple answers that once satisfied it? I know it can be exhausting to live with constant clarity, always analyzing, always questioning. If this feeling resonates with you, share in the comments. I lost the ability to live on autopilot when I discovered that. Your experience may help others who are going through the same irreversible transformation, showing them they are not alone on this journey of forced lucidity. The second loss that accompanies awakening is equally painful. You lose forever the ability to find lasting satisfaction in the conventional rewards society offers: social status, financial success, professional recognition, accumulation of material goods. All these achievements that once might have brought a genuine sense of fulfillment now reveal themselves as empty games with arbitrary rules. It's not that you become indifferent to these things, or that you develop a spiritual arrogance that despises them. It's something more subtle and disturbing. You continue to participate in these social games because you need to live in the world, but the emotional satisfaction they provide becomes increasingly shallow and temporary. This transformation in your relationship with conventional rewards reveals one of the cruelest contradictions of the modern human condition. Contemporary society is structured around the promise that certain material and social achievements will bring us lasting happiness and meaning. The entire economic and social system depends on our belief in this promise. But when you awaken, you realize this promise is fundamentally false, not because the rewards are inherently bad, but because they are inadequate to satisfy the deepest needs of human consciousness. What makes this discovery particularly distressing is that you can't simply leave the system. You still need to work, pay bills, maintain relationships, participate in society. But now you do all of this with the constant awareness that you are participating in a theater whose script was written by forces that don't truly understand what human beings need to flourish. It's like discovering you're an actor in a play no one really wants to watch, but everyone agreed to pretend is the most important production in history. This disconnect between our authentic needs and the rewards society offers is not accidental. It's the result of a long historical process in which social structures became increasingly abstract and detached from direct human experience. In traditional societies, work was tangibly connected to survival and the well-being of the community. Social rewards were linked to real contributions to collective life. But in modern society, we created reward systems based on financial abstractions and bureaucratic hierarchies that often have no direct relationship to meaningful contributions to human well-being. The third and perhaps most devastating loss is the loss of certainty about who you really are. Before awakening, your identity was relatively simple. You were defined by your social roles, your achievements, your preferences, your relationships, your beliefs. There was a coherent narrative about who you were and where you were going. But awakening irreversibly fragments that narrative. You discover that what you thought was your authentic personality was largely a collage of social conditioning, unprocessed traumas, family expectations, and cultural influences you never consciously questioned. This dissolution of a fixed identity is not just an abstract philosophical crisis, it's a visceral experience of disorientation that affects every aspect of daily life. You may find yourself questioning decisions you once made automatically, doubting preferences you always believed were genuine, feeling like a stranger in conversations that once flowed naturally. It's like discovering you've always worn a mask, but now can't remember what your face looked like without it. This loss of identity certainty reveals a fundamental truth about the nature of human consciousness that most people are never forced to confront. The feeling of having a solid and continuous self is largely a psychological construction necessary to navigate the social world, but it doesn't reflect the deeper reality of how consciousness actually works. We are, in fact, dynamic processes in constant change, influenced moment by internal and external factors that are in constant flux. A fixed identity is a useful illusion, but still an illusion. What makes this discovery particularly difficult is that the entire structure of modern society is based on the premise that people have stable and predictable identities. Our legal, economic, educational, and social systems operate under the assumption that you today are the same person who signed contracts in the past and will be responsible for your decisions in the future. But when you awaken to the fluid nature of identity, this premise becomes problematic. How can you make long-term plans when you're not sure who you'll be in 5 years? How can you maintain relationships based on expectations about who you are when your own self-perception is in constant flux? These three losses that accompany awakening create an existential paradox that defines the experience of those who can no longer live in collective unconsciousness. On the one hand, there is a deep sense of liberation. You've freed yourself from illusions that limited your perception and your ability to experience life more authentically. There is a mental clarity that allows you to see through the social and psychological manipulations that once controlled your behavior without you realizing it. There is the possibility of living according to values that are genuinely your own, rather than simply reproducing programs installed in your mind by external forces. On the other hand, this liberation comes with profound psychological isolation. Most people around you continue to live within meaning structures you've already transcended, but can no longer inhabit. Social conversations can become constant translation exercises where you have to speak the language of conventional concerns while internally navigating existential questions that most people don't even recognize as real. You may feel like an adult forced to take part in childish games, understanding the rules, but finding it difficult to genuinely engage with the play. Modern technology intensifies this condition in several disturbing ways. Social media and recommendation algorithms are specifically designed to keep people in states of semi-consciousness, offering endless distractions that prevent the kind of deep reflection that leads to awakening. At the same time, these same technologies create the illusion of connection and meaning through likes, comments, and shares that simulate genuine social recognition without offering real substance. For someone who has awakened, these platforms reveal themselves as sophisticated systems of psychological manipulation, masked as tools for human connection. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of contemporary technology is its ability to make even the experience of awakening optional. Virtual realities, immersive entertainments, and developing neural interfaces promise to create environments where we can completely avoid confronting difficult existential questions. Why question the nature of reality when we can create alternative realities that are more rewarding? Why face the anguish of identity uncertainty when we can assume digital identities that offer instant gratification? Technology is not just creating new forms of distraction, it is potentially eliminating the psychological need for awakening. This possibility raises profound questions about the future of human consciousness and whether individual awakening has any value in a world where AI-assisted unconsciousness may become infinitely more comfortable than lucidity. If technology can solve all the practical problems of human life while keeping people in states of artificial satisfaction, what is the argument for facing the painful losses that accompany awakening? Why choose difficult clarity when pleasant illusion is becoming increasingly sophisticated? The answer to these questions cannot be found in the utilitarian logic that governs most contemporary thought. The value of awakening does not lie in its ability to solve practical problems or increase happiness in the conventional sense. Its value is related to more fundamental questions about what it means to be human and what kind of consciousness we want to cultivate, both individually and as a species. Awakening represents a form of existential dignity that affirms it is worth confronting reality as it is, even when that confrontation is painful and destabilizing. The three losses that accompany awakening are, paradoxically, also three forms of gain that are impossible to achieve by other means. The loss of the ability to live on autopilot becomes the ability to make genuinely conscious choices. The loss of satisfaction with conventional rewards makes room for deeper forms of fulfillment that emerge from the alignment between authentic values and actions. The loss of fixed identity certainty becomes a psychological flexibility that allows creative adaptation to changing circumstances without losing a sense of personal integrity. But these gains do not compensate for the losses in a simple or direct way. There is no fair trade where you give up comforting illusions and receive consoling truths in return. Awakening is more like an irreversible metamorphosis where you become a different kind of conscious being with expanded capacities but also with vulnerabilities that did not exist before. It is like developing an additional sense that allows you to perceive dimensions of reality previously invisible, but that also makes it impossible to ignore disturbing aspects of existence that others can easily avoid. The question then becomes not whether awakening is worth it, because for many people, this is not really a conscious choice. Awakening often happens in response to crises, losses, or confrontations with mortality that force a deep re-evaluation of the basic premises on which we build our lives. The more relevant question is how to live constructively after awakening has already occurred, how to integrate expanded perceptions with the practical needs of existing in a world that operates mainly through collective consensuses that you can no longer accept uncritically. One of the most important strategies for navigating this condition is to develop what we could call existential bilingualism. Just as someone who speaks two languages can switch between them depending on the context, an awakened person can learn to switch between different levels of consciousness depending on the circumstances. This does not mean being false or manipulative, but rather recognizing that different situations require different forms of engagement. You can genuinely participate in conversations about conventional topics without pretending that they hold the same meaning for you as they do for others. You can work within systems you recognize as imperfect without destructive cynicism, maintaining a long-term perspective on how to contribute to gradual changes. Another crucial strategy is to find or create communities of people who share similar levels of consciousness. The psychological isolation that often accompanies awakening is not inevitable, but it requires intentional effort to connect with others who have made similar journeys. These connections do not need to be based on specific ideologies or particular spiritual practices. What matters is the ability to speak honestly about the existential realities that most people prefer to avoid, and to support each other in the ongoing process of living consciously in a world that often rewards unconsciousness. Perhaps most important is to develop a form of compassion that recognizes that most people living in states of semi-consciousness did not choose that condition out of malice or laziness. The social, economic, and psychological structures that keep people in comfortable illusions exist because they serve important functions of social stability and basic psychological well-being. Awakening does not make a person morally superior. It makes them responsible for using their expanded perceptions in ways that contribute to collective well-being, rather than simply criticizing those who have not undergone the same transformations. If these reflections touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found the words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the existential challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the big questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth, where we can process together the implications of living consciously in times of accelerated change. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to navigate the losses and gains of awakening and how to contribute to a future where expanded consciousness serves human flourishing instead of existential isolation. Awakening, with all its irreversible losses, is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a completely new way of being in the world. The three things you lose forever: autopilot, satisfaction with conventional rewards, and identity certainty, are also the three things that prevent most people from discovering what it really means to be fully alive. You may no longer be able to go back to who you were before, but that opens up the possibility of becoming who you truly are, beyond the conditioning and illusions that defined your previous experience. And perhaps, in the end, that is the most valuable trade anyone can make: to abandon the safety of unconsciousness in favor of the dangerous and extraordinary adventure of living as a fully awakened human being.
development, especially in the field of information technology, we will be freed, liberated from ignorance and delusion. And it's not happening. In the monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam, there is a belief in evil. But in Hinduism and Buddhism, the main idea is that the problem is usually ignorance and delusion. People sometimes think that AI maybe will tell us the truth about the world. Again, it's unlikely to happen. The danger is that AI will entrap us, imprison us within a web of delusions even worse than anything we have seen before in history.